The rain on 7 was not like rain on Earth. It burned. It ate through metal and melted stone. It fell from green clouds that covered the sky like a sickness, and when it touched skin, it left marks that never fully healed. Lieutenant Park had been on this moon for 11 months. She knew its dangers better than anyone. She knew the acid storms that came without warning. She knew the strange plants that moved when you were not looking. And she knew about There were the reason this moon was empty. No colony ships came here, no mining companies, no scientists. The Galactic Union had marked 7 with a red warning sign that meant only one thing: death lived here. There were predators not like the wolves or lions of old Earth stories. They were something far worse. They stood 3 meters tall when fully grown. They had 6 legs and scales as black as the space between stars. Their eyes glowed amber in the darkness, and they could see heat, movement, and fear. They hunted in packs. They killed for territory. And they never, ever forgot a face. The Union called them Category 9 predators. That meant they were smart enough to plan attacks and dangerous enough to destroy entire outposts. Soldiers were told one simple rule: if you see a, run. If you cannot run, pray. Had seen them from a distance many times. She had watched them move through the dead forests like shadows. She had heard their calls at night, sounds that made her blood turn cold. But she had never been close to one, not until today. She was doing a routine check of the perimeter sensors. It was boring work, the kind of job that made time move slowly. Walk to sensor 1, check the readings, walk to sensor 2, check the readings, walk to sensor 3, over and over. The same thing every week. The storm came fast. One moment the sky was its usual gray. The next moment it turned green and the first drops began to fall. Felt one hit her shoulder and heard the hiss of acid meeting fabric. She ran. There was a rocky area about 50 meters ahead. She had used it for shelter before. The rocks formed a natural roof that kept the rain out. She made it just in time. The storm grew stronger behind her, and the sound of acid hitting stone was like 1,000 snakes hissing at once. Pressed herself against the back wall of the small cave and caught her breath. Her shoulder stung where the rain had touched her uniform. She would need to check it later, but for now she was safe. She just had to wait. That was when she heard the sound. It was small, weak, a sound of pain and fear. At first she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her ears, but then she heard it again, a whimper, a cry, something was hurting. Moved deeper into the cave. The rocks twisted and turned, creating a path that led further down. She followed the sound, her hand on her weapon, her heart beating fast. She did not know what she would find. Part of her did not want to know. The cave opened into a larger space. Light came through cracks in the ceiling enough to see by, and in that light saw them. 4 small creatures huddled together in the corner. They had 6 legs and black scales. They had amber eyes that glowed with fear. They were cubs, bobbies. The largest was no bigger than a dog. The smallest was the size of a cat. They were dyings. Their scales had not hardened yet. Knew this from the biology reports she had read during her training. Young had soft scales for their first year of life. The acid rain was eating through them. She could see the burns on their small bodies, the places where the rain had found them before they reached shelter. The cubs saw her and hissed. It was a tiny sound, nothing like the terrifying calls of adult. They were trying to be scary, trying to protect themselves, but they were just children. Scared children in pain. Looked past them and saw something else. 20 meters away, lying in the open where the rain still fell, was a large body. An adult, the mother, she was not moving. Could see the burns on her body, but they were not from acid. They were from plasma weapons, poachers. The cubs were alone, their mother was dead, and the storm was still burning them. Stood very still. Her training told her what to do: walk away, do not interfere with local wildlife, do not interact with Category 9 predators, report the sighting and let nature take its course. But her training had not prepared her for this. It had not prepared her for the way the smallest cub looked at her, its amber eyes full of pain and confusion. It had not prepared her for the way the largest cub tried to shield its siblings with its own body, even though that body was covered in acid burns. They were predators. One day, if they lived, they would be monsters. They would hunt and kill without mercy. They would be everything the reports said they were. But right now, they were just bobbies, cold, hurt, and alone. Thought about her own mother. She thought about the stories her mother used to tell her about Earth, about the old days when humans lived beside wolves and learned to be friends. Her mother always said that humans had a gift. They could look at something dangerous and see something worth saving. The rain was getting through the cracks in the ceiling. Small drops were falling on the cubs, burning them more. They cried out in pain, and the sound cut through like a knife. She made her choice. Unzipped her thermal jacket. It was rated to withstand the acid rain for up to 30 minutes. It was the only protection she had. She took it off and felt the cold air hit her body. Then she knelt down and held the jacket open. The cubs hissed louder. The largest one, the brave one, slashed at the air with its small claws. It was telling her to stay away, to leave them alone. Did not move, she just waited. She held the jacket open like a door and she waited. Minutes passed, the storm raged outside. Acid dripped from the ceiling and hissed on the ground. Felt some of it hit her back, felt the burn start, but she did not move. She just looked at the cubs with soft eyes and waited. The smallest cub moved first. It was too weak to be afraid anymore. It crawled forward on shaking legs, dragging itself toward the warmth of its body. When it reached her, it pressed its cold nose against her stomach and made a small sound, a sound of relief. The second cub followed, then the third. They pressed against, seeking her warmth, hiding from the acid that fell around them. The largest cub watched, its amber eyes studied, looking for danger, looking for tricks. It did not trust her, it did not understand her. But it saw its siblings safe in her arms, and slowly, very slowly, it moved forward too. When all four cubs were pressed against her chest, carefully wrapped her jacket around them. The acid hit her back again and again. She would have scars, she would need treatment, but the cubs were safe, they were warm, they were alive. She held them as the storm raged on. She held them as the acid burned her skin. She held them and made a promise, though she did not say it out loud. She would not let them die, not today, not ever. The storm lasted for 2 more hours. When it finally stopped, stood on shaking legs. The cubs were asleep, exhausted from fear and pain. She found an empty supply crate near the cave entrance and placed them inside, still wrapped in her jacket. Then she began the long walk back to base, carrying 4 apex predators like they were the most precious cargo in the universe. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if she would be punished or praised. She did not know if the cubs would live or die. But she knew one thing for certain. She had done the right thing. And whatever came next, she would face it, for them. The base was quiet when arrived. Most of the soldiers were in the mess hall eating dinner. The sun was setting behind the green clouds and the air still smelled like acid from the storm. Walked through the main gate with the supply crate in her arms, her back burning with pain, her uniform ruined. The guard at the gate, a young private named, looked at her with wide eyes. He saw the burns on her back, the holes in her uniform, and the way she held the crate like it contained something fragile. "Lieutenant Park, you need medical attention," he said, reaching for his radio. "Not yet," said, her voice was tired but firm. "I need to see Captain Lee first." Wanted to argue, but something in his eyes stopped him. He stepped aside and let her pass. Captain Lee was in his office, reading reports on his. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been a soldier for 30 years and he had seen many strange things. But when walked into his office and placed the supply crate on his desk, he saw something that made him forget every word he knew. The crate moved, small sounds came from inside. Whimpers and chirps and tiny growls, stood up slowly and looked at, then at the crate, then at again. "Park," he said, his voice very calm, "what is in that crate?" Reached down and lifted the lid. 4 pairs of amber eyes looked up at them. 4 small cubs huddled together under a thermal jacket, their scales still soft and covered in acid burns. The largest one hissed at, showing tiny teeth that would one day be deadly. The smallest one pressed closer to his jacket, seeking her scent. Stared at them for a long time. Then he sat down in his chair, rubbed his face with both hands, and said the only thing he could think of. "Park, are those what I think they are?" "Orphans, sir." They are children." Looked at her, he saw the burns on her back, the determination in her eyes, the way she stood between him and the crate like she was ready to fight. He had known for 11 months. She was a good soldier, quiet, reliable. She followed orders and did her job, but right now he could see something else in her, something that no amount of training could create. She cared about these small creatures more than she cared about rules or regulations or her own safety. "Their mother?" he asked. "Poachers, plasma burns, she was dead when I found them." Closed his eyes. Poachers were a problem on many border moons. They killed rare creatures and sold parts on the black market. Scales were worth a fortune. But poaching was also very illegal, and if word got out that poachers were operating on 7, there would be investigations and questions and trouble. "The Union is going to have us both shot," he said. "Probably, sir." "You know the rules, no interference with local wildlife. No contact with Category 9 predators. No adoption of alien species without proper permits and review." "I know the rules, sir." "And you did this anyway?" "Yes, sir." Looked at the cubs again. The largest one was still hissing at him, but its hisses were getting weaker. It was tired. They were all tired, scared and hurt and alone. He thought about his own children back on Earth. He had not seen them in 2 years. He thought about how he would feel if something happened to them and a stranger found them and decided to walk away. I will file it as a scientific observation mission, he said quietly. Temporary containment of local specimens for study. That should buy us some time. The shoulders relaxed. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me yet. You need to keep them alive and you need to keep them secret. If the wrong people find out about this, we are both finished. Understood, sir. Stood up and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back and looked at the crate one more time. The smallest cub had climbed out and was pressing itself against his leg, making small sounds of comfort. Park, he said, what made you do it? Why risk everything for them? Thought about the question. She thought about the storm and the cave and the dying cubs. She thought about the choice she had made. Because they were cold, she said simply, and I had warmth to give. Nodded slowly, then he left, closing the door behind him. Looked down at the cubs. They were all awake now, watching her with those strange amber eyes. The largest one had stopped hissing. It was looking at her with something that might have been curiosity. Okay, said softly, let us get you cleaned up. She carried the crate to the medical bay. Medic was there, organizing supplies. She was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. When she saw Burns, she immediately reached for her treatment kit. When she saw the cubs, she dropped it. Lieutenant Park said, her voice shaking, are those? Yes, can you help them? Looked at the cubs, she looked at the cubs again. Then she took a deep breath and nodded. Put them on the table gently. For the next 2 hours, they worked together, cleaned the acid burns and applied healing gel. She checked the cubs for broken bones and internal injuries. She gave them water and a protein mix that she hoped they could eat. The cubs were scared at first. They hissed and scratched and tried to bite. The largest one, the brave one, cut his arm with its claws. Blood dripped onto the floor but did not pull away. She just held still and let the cubs see that she was not a threat. Slowly, very slowly, the cubs began to calm down. They smelled blood and found no danger in it. They felt her gentle hands and heard her soft voice. They did not understand her words, but they understood her meaning. She was safe. She was warm. She was not like the ones who had killed their mother. The smallest cub was the first to trust her completely. It climbed into her lap and curled up, pressing its nose against her stomach. It was the same thing it had done in the cave, seeking her warmth, seeking her protection. Watched with wide eyes. I have never seen anything like this, she whispered. Are supposed to be impossible to approach. The reports say they attack on sight. The reports are about adults, said. These are children. They do not know what they are supposed to be yet. The largest cub was still watching her. It had stopped fighting, but it had not relaxed. Its amber eyes followed every movement, studying, learning, judging. Met its gaze. I am not going to hurt you, she said. I promise. The cub did not understand the words, but something in its voice, something in her eyes, made it stop being afraid. It walked forward slowly, stepping over its siblings until it was standing right in front of her face. Then it did something that made gasp. It pressed its forehead against it. In culture, this was a greeting between family members. It meant trust, it meant acceptance, it meant you are one of us now. The cub did not know that was human. It did not know that humans and were supposed to be enemies. It only knew that this strange creature had saved its life, had protected its siblings, had offered warmth when everything else was cold. Closed her eyes and let the cub's forehead rest against hers. She felt its small breaths, its racing heart, its fear slowly turning into something else, something like hope. I will take care of you, she whispered, all of you, I promise. When she opened her eyes, all 4 cubs were looking at her. The smallest was in her lap. The middle 2 were pressed against her legs, and the largest was still touching foreheads with her, its amber eyes bright with something new. Trust. Finished treating the last of the burns and stepped back. Her hands were shaking, but she was smiling. Well, she said, I guess we have some new patients. Looked at the cubs. They were still scared. They were still hurt. They had lost their mother and everything they knew. But they were alive and they were safe and they had found something they did not expect to find. They had found family. Yes, said, holding them close. I guess we do. Outside, the sun finished setting and the stars came out. The green clouds parted just enough to show a sliver of the galaxy above. Somewhere out there, poachers were counting their profits and the Galactic Union was writing reports, and the universe kept turning without caring about 1 small moon and 4 small cubs. But in the medical bay of a tiny outpost, something important was happening, something that would change everything. A human and 4 predators were learning to be family. And that was just the beginning. 3 months passed on 7 and the cubs grew. Gave them names, though she knew she probably should not have. Names made things personal. Names made things real. But how could she look at 4 small creatures every day and call them specimen 1, 2, 3, and 4? That was not who they were. The largest cub, the brave one who had pressed its forehead to hers, she called. It meant spring, the season of new beginnings, was the leader of the 4. She was fierce and proud and always the first to investigate new sounds. When strangers came near, she stood in front of her siblings with her scales raised and her small teeth showing. She was protecting them the same way her mother once did. The second cub she called, he was the hunter. Even as a baby, he had the instincts of a killer. He stalked supply drones through the hallways like they were prey. He hid behind corners and jumped out at soldiers walking past. Most of them screamed the first time it happened. Some of them screamed every time, seemed to enjoy this very much. The third cub she was the gentle one, the dreamer. While her siblings played and fought and explored, liked to find patches of artificial sunlight and sleep in them for hours. She made soft chirping sounds when she was happy, sounds that reminded of birds singing on a summer morning. When wanted attention, she would press her head against hand and chirp until stopped whatever she was doing and petted her. And then there was the runt, the smallest, the one who had been closest to death on that terrible day in the cave. Became's shadow. Wherever went followed. When she worked at her console, curled up under her chair. When she ate in the mess hall, waited beside her tray, watching every bite with curious eyes. When she slept, pressed against her back, a small furnace of warmth that rumbled with sounds like distant thunder. At first, tried to create distance. She was a soldier, not a mother. She had duties and responsibilities and a chain of command to respect. She could not spend all her time caring for alien cubs. But would not let her go. Every time left her quarters, cried, not the terrifying calls of an adult but small, sad sounds that broke's heart, would press against the door and cry until came back. And when she did come back, would run to her and press against her legs and make sounds of pure happiness. After 2 weeks, stopped trying to leave behind. The other soldiers on the base had different reactions to the cubs. Most of them were terrified at first. They had all read the reports about. They had all seen pictures of what adult could do to a human body. Every warning, every training video, every story told them that these creatures were monsters. But monsters did not chase their own tails. Monsters did not get hiccups after eating too fast. Monsters did not cry when their favorite human left the room. Private was the first to break. Was a quiet soldier who did her work and kept to herself. She had lost her younger brother and sister in a colony attack 5 years ago. She never talked about it, but everyone knew. The loss had left a hole in her heart that nothing seemed to fill. One day, wandered away from and found sitting alone in the storage room. Walked up to her, made her gentle chirping sound and pressed her head against his hand. Looked down at the small creature. She saw amber eyes looking up at her with trust and curiosity. She felt the soft scales under her fingers, and something inside her broke open. She started crying, great heavy sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her brother and her sister and all the things she had lost, and through it all stayed with her. The little cub climbed into her lap and pressed against her chest, making soft sounds of comfort. When found them an hour later, was asleep with curled up beside her. Both of them looked peaceful in a way that had never seen before. After that, started helping with the cubs. She snuck extra rations from the kitchen. She taught them to play fetch with a ball made of old rags. She let sleep in her bunk when was on duty. The other soldiers saw this and said nothing. What was there to say? Then Sergeant Minu got involved. Minu was the base mechanic. He was a big man with rough hands and a gruff voice. He complained about everything and seemed to hate everyone. No one expected him to care about 4 alien cubs. But Minu had a secret. He loved building things, not just fixing broken equipment but creating new things. Toys, gadgets, little machines that did not serve any real purpose except to make people smile. He saw trying to hunt a supply drone and getting frustrated when it flew too high. That night, Minu stayed up late and built something. The next morning, he left it in the hallway where the cubs liked to play. It was a small machine shaped like a mouse. It moved on tiny wheels and made soft sounds. When saw it, his eyes went wide. He crouched down, his tail flicking, his whole body ready to pounce. The chase lasted for 20 minutes. Stalked the machine through the hallways, over tables, under chairs. He pounced on it again and again, and every time he caught it, it would wiggle free and run away again. When finally caught it for good, he carried it back to like a prize. He dropped it at her feet and made a sound of pride. Look what I did, look how strong I am. Looked at the machine, then at Minu, who was watching from the doorway. He shrugged and looked away, pretending he did not care, but saw the small smile on his face. After that, Minu built more toys, climbing structures, hiding spots, puzzle boxes that had treats inside. The cubs loved them all and Minu loved watching them play. Medic had been there from the beginning, but now she had a new purpose. She started documenting everything, every behavior, every sound, every interaction between the cubs and the humans. She filled notebooks with observations and drawings. She recorded videos and took measurements. No one has ever studied juvenile behavior before, she told one evening. Everything we know about them comes from encounters with adults, but these cubs are showing us something completely different. What do you mean? Asked. Pulled up her notes on her, are supposed to be solitary hunters. The reports say they only form packs for mating and territory disputes, but look at these four. They play together, they sleep together, they protect each other. That is not solitary behavior, that is family behavior. Looked at the cubs, was grooming scales, cleaning places he could not reach himself, was sharing a piece of food with even though he was clearly hungry. They were not just siblings, they were a unit, a pack. And look at how they interact with us, continued. They seek physical contact, they respond to our voices, they show signs of separation anxiety when their favorite humans leave. These are bonding behaviors, the same kind of behaviors we see in domesticated animals on Earth. Thought about this? On Earth, humans had lived beside wolves for thousands of years. Over time, some wolves had become dogs. They had learned to trust humans, to love humans, to be family with humans. It had seemed like a miracle at the time. How could predators become companions? But maybe it was not a miracle. Maybe it was just what happened when two species chose to care about each other. You think they are bonding with us? Asked. Smiled. I think they already have. As if to prove her point, walked over and pressed against leg. He looked up at her with his amber eyes and made his thunder-rumbling sound, the sound that meant he was happy, the sound that meant he was home. Reached down and scratched behind his scales in the spot that always made him purr louder. I think you are right, she said. One by one, the soldiers of 7 became part of the pack. Some of them took longer than others. Some of them never fully accepted the cubs as family, but most of them came around eventually. They brought treats and toys. They talked to the cubs in soft voices. They let the cubs sleep in their quarters when the nights were cold. They became aunts and uncles and older siblings to 4 small creatures who should have been their enemies. The cubs, in turn, learned the routines of the base. They knew when meals were served and where the warmest spots were. They knew which soldiers liked to play and which ones wanted to be left alone. They learned that humans were loud and strange and confusing, but also kind and warm and safe. 3 months after found them in that cave, the cubs were no longer strangers. They were family. And the base that had once been a lonely outpost on a dangerous moon had become something else entirely. It had become home. The Union ship came without warning. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel 300 kilometers above 7 and began its descent immediately. No advance notice, no communication requesting permission to land, just a large gray vessel cutting through the green clouds like a knife through water. Captain Lee saw it on the sensors first. His blood turned cold. All personnel to stations, he said into the base intercom. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. We have visitors. Was in the recreation room when she heard the announcement. Was at her side, nearly as tall as her waist now. The cubs had grown so much in 6 months, their scales had hardened, their claws had sharpened. They were still young, still playful, but anyone could see what they would become. Apex predators, the most dangerous creatures on 7. What is happening? Asked, coming to stand beside. I do not know, said, but she had a bad feeling, a very bad feeling. The ship landed outside the base perimeter. Its doors opened and a delegation walked out. Leading them was a creature that had only seen in training videos, a diplomat. They were one of the founding species of the Galactic Union. They had too many eyes, too many legs, and too few emotions. They saw everything in terms of efficiency and threat assessment. They did not understand concepts like mercy or compassion. To them, the universe was a machine, and anything that did not fit the machine needed to be removed. The diplomat's name was. He had 8 eyes arranged in a circle around his head, and they all moved independently, scanning everything. Behind him walked 12 Union soldiers in full combat armor, their weapons charged and ready. Met them at the gate. He stood straight and kept his face neutral, even though his heart was pounding. Ambassador, he said, we were not expecting an inspection. That is the point of surprise inspections, Captain. His translator box turned his clicking sounds into flat, emotionless words. We have received reports of unauthorized containment at this facility. I am here to investigate. Stomach dropped, but he did not let it show. I assure you, Ambassador, all activities at this base follow proper protocols, if you would like to review our documentation. I would like to see the specimens. Interrupted. Now. There was no way to hide, no way to pretend. Led the delegation into the base, walking slowly, trying to give time to prepare. But prepare for what? There was nothing they could do. They found in the main hallway. She was standing with her back straight and her chin raised, looking like a soldier facing a firing squad. Behind her, the four cubs stood in a line. They were beautiful, terrifying, and beautiful. Scales gleamed like polished obsidian. Its amber eyes tracked every movement of the Union soldiers, stood very still, her body tense with fear, and pressed against leg, his small growls vibrating through her uniform. Stopped, all eight of his eyes focused on the cubs. Category 9 predators, he said, in a military facility with humans. They are research subjects, said quickly. Registered under Section 7 of the Biological Survey, we have full documentation. I have reviewed your documentation, Captain. It is creative fiction. His eyes swiveled to look at, you are Lieutenant Park, the one who found them. Met his gaze, yes. You brought Category 9 predators into a human facility. You have raised them for 6 months. You have allowed them to interact freely with military personnel. Oh yes. Why? Thought about the cave, the acid rain, the dying cubs, the choice she had made. Because they needed help, she said, and I could help them. Made a sound that might have been a laugh if could laugh. A touching sentiment, but sentiments do not change biological reality. These creatures are predators, they cannot be domesticated, they cannot feel loyalty, they cannot be trusted. You are wrong, said. Every Union soldier raised their weapon slightly, closed his eyes. Somewhere behind them made a small sound of fear. Moved closer, he was taller than and he used his height to try to intimidate her. His 8 eyes studied her face, looking for weakness. I have reviewed thousands of encounters with species, he said. In every single case, they have attacked, killed, or driven away any intelligent species that entered their territory. They do not form bonds, they do not feel affection. They are killing machines wrapped in scales. Those encounters were with adults who saw intruders on their land, said. These are children who lost their mother. They did not know what humans were supposed to be, so they decided for themselves. And what did they decide? That we are family. Stared at her for a long moment, then he turned to his soldiers. Kill them. The soldiers raised their weapons, moved to shield the cubs with her body, stepped forward shouting, screamed, the whole base seemed to freeze. And then moved. The runt, the smallest, the weakest of the four, he stepped in front of, put himself between her and the weapons and growled. It was not a baby sound anymore. It was the growl of a predator defending its pack. His scales rose along his spine, his claws dug into the floor, his amber eyes blazed with something that every being in the galaxy could recognize. Love, fierce, protective, unbreakable love. Joined him, she stood at his side, twice his size, her teeth bared and her body coiled like a spring. Flanked them, moving to cover any angle of attack. And gentle, who hated conflict, positioned herself directly in front of his heart. 4 apex predators stood as a living shield around a single human. The Union soldiers hesitated. They had never seen anything like this. Their training had told them that attacked humans. Their training had not prepared them for protecting humans. Ambassador said, stepping forward with her in shaking hands. I have documented over 300 instances of protective behavior, mutual grooming, coordinated activity with human handlers. These creatures have formed a bond with Lieutenant Park and her unit, a real bond, the kind we see between parent and child. Impossible, said, but his voice was less certain now. Humans have been doing this for 40,000 years, said. She had not moved. The cubs had not moved. They stood together, predators and prey, protector and protected. On our home world, we took wolves and made them dogs. We took wild cats and made them companions. We looked at the most dangerous creatures we could find and said, I bet we could be friends. She reached down and placed her hand on his neck. He pressed into her touch, still growling, still ready to fight and die for her. That is what humans do, Ambassador. We do not conquer nature, we make family out of it. His eyes moved from to the cubs to the other humans in the hallway, had moved to stand beside her, hand resting on the cub's back. Minu had positioned himself near, his fists clenched, even had stepped closer to, ready to defend a creature that should have been his enemy. This is what predators look like when they love you, said. I know you cannot understand it, Ambassador, but that does not make it less real. The silence stretched. The soldiers looked at, waiting for orders, looked at the cubs, his 8 eyes processing what he was seeing. Finally, he spoke. Lower your weapons. The soldiers obeyed. The cubs did not relax, but they stopped growling. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. I will need to file a report, said. His voice was different now, not friendly but not hostile. The Union Council will want to review this case. Of course, said, we will cooperate fully. I expect detailed documentation, medical records, behavioral studies, everything. You will have it, said. Turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at and the cubs one more time. I have served the Union for 200 years, he said. I have seen many species, I have studied many cultures, but I have never seen a predator choose to die for another species. Maybe you have not been looking in the right places, said. Made that almost laughing sound again. Then he walked away, his soldiers following behind him. When the ship lifted off an hour later, the whole base let out a breath they had been holding, collapsed against the wall. Minu sat down heavily on a supply crate, put his head in his hands. Stayed where she was, the cubs were still pressed against her, their bodies slowly relaxing. Was shaking, the bravery draining out of him now that the danger had passed. He had been ready to die for her. He was still just a baby and he had been ready to die. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around him. She held him close and felt his thunder rumbling start again. Not scared now, safe, home. Thank you, she whispered. Pressed her forehead against and crowded close, adding their warmth to the embrace. They had faced death together. And they had won. But knew this was not over. The Union would be back. There would be more questions, more investigations, more people who did not understand what they had built here. She looked at her cubs, her family, her pack. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The footage leaked 3 days after Ambassador left 7. No one knew how it happened. Maybe one of the Union soldiers had recorded the confrontation. Maybe someone on the base had captured it without realizing. Maybe the universe just wanted the story to be told. But however it happened, the video spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. It showed everything, the Union soldiers with their weapons raised, the 4 cubs stepping forward to shield their human, the moment when predators chose to die rather than let their family be harmed. And it showed standing tall, unafraid, her hand on his neck, her voice steady as she said words that would become famous across 1,000 worlds. This is what predators look like when they love you. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On the trade stations of the Outer Rim, beings gathered around screens to watch the video again and again. On the core worlds of the Union, politicians debated what it meant. On ships traveling between stars, crews shared the footage and talked about the strange humans who could turn monsters into family. The story got a name, The Incident. But it was more than an incident. It was a change, a shift, a new way of seeing things. For as long as anyone could remember, humans had been feared. They were the species that refused to die. The species that could survive on any planet, eat any food, breathe any air. They were tough and stubborn and terrifying in their persistence. But this was different. This was not about surviving. This was about something else entirely. Humans did not just live on hostile worlds. They made friends there. Messages began arriving at 7, thousands of them. From scientists who wanted to study the cubs, from journalists who wanted to interview, from ordinary beings on ordinary planets who just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for showing us something beautiful. Thank you for proving that kindness can exist in dark places. Thank you for being humans. Did not know how to handle the attention. She was a soldier, not a celebrity. She had not rescued the cubs to become famous. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. But the galaxy had seen her, and the galaxy would not forget. Captain helped as much as he could. He handled the official communications, the media requests, the political inquiries. He built walls around and the cubs, protecting them from the chaos outside. You should be proud, he told one evening. You have done something remarkable. I just helped some children, said. Anyone would have done the same. Smiled sadly. No, Lieutenant, that is exactly the point. Not everyone would have. Most species would have walked away. Most species would have seen predators and thought only of danger. You saw children and thought only of help. He paused, looking out the window at the green clouds of 7. That is what makes humans special, not your strength or your endurance, your heart. The cubs continued to grow. Was nearly full-sized now, a magnificent creature of obsidian scales and burning eyes. She had taken on the role of pack leader completely, organizing the other cubs, watching for threats, making decisions about where to sleep and when to hunt. But she still pressed her forehead against every morning. She still sought approval from her human mother. She still purred when scratched behind her scales. Had become an expert hunter. He caught real prey now, not just toy mice. He disappeared into the wilderness for hours at a time and returned with food to share with the pack. He was fierce and independent, but he always came back. He always brought gifts for his family. Remained the gentle one, she spent her days sleeping in sunbeams and making her chirping sounds. She had become the emotional heart of the pack, the one who noticed when someone was sad and pressed against them until they felt better. The soldiers loved her. They fought over who got to pet her first. And stayed by his side. He was not the runt anymore. He had grown strong and fast, his scales as dark as his siblings, his eyes as bright. But he never forgot what had done for him. He never forgot the warmth of her jacket, the safety of her arms, the moment when she had chosen to save him. He followed her still. When she worked, he waited. When she ate, he watched. When she slept, he pressed against her back and made his thunder sounds. He was hers and she was his, and nothing in the universe could change that. 6 months after the incident, something unexpected happened. Other began appearing at the perimeter of the base. Not attacking, not hunting, just watching. They came alone at first, then in pairs, then in small groups. They stood at the edge of the cleared area and looked at the strange structure where humans lived. They sniffed the air, catching scents they did not understand. They listened to sounds that should have meant danger but somehow did not. The cubs were curious, especially wanted to approach the wild to communicate with her own kind, but held her back. "Wait," she said, "let them come to us." They waited. Days passed, then weeks. The wild came closer and closer, taking their time, being careful. They were not like the cubs. They had not grown up trusting humans. They had to learn. One morning, woke early and walked to the perimeter alone. A wild was there, a large male with scars on his scales. Approached him slowly, her body language careful and respectful. They touched foreheads. Watched from the base, holding her breath. Stood beside her, recording everything. "She is teaching him," whispered. "She is showing him that humans are safe." The male looked past to the base. He saw the buildings, the soldiers, the strange bipeds who walked around without fear. He smelled their scents mixed with the scents of cubs. He sensed something that his instincts could not explain. Family. He did not attack, he did not run. He just looked and learned and remembered. More connections followed. Hunted with wild packs and brought them back to the perimeter. Sang her chirping songs and wild cubs crept closer to listen. Stood beside when she walked the perimeter, showing the watchers that predators and humans could exist together. Slowly, carefully, the wild began to trust. 1 year after had found the cubs in that cave, a hunting party appeared at the base entrance. 12 adults led by. They carried fresh meat from a kill, and they dropped it at the base gate like an offering. "A gift, a thank you, an invitation. They are inviting us into their territory," said, her voice full of wonder. Looked at who pressed her forehead against hers. She looked at who pressed against her side. She looked at the wild who watched her with ancient eyes that were learning new things. "No," she said, "they are inviting us into their family." The legend spread across the stars. The humans of 7, the predator cubs who became children, the woman who opened her jacket and changed everything. Other species tried to understand. They studied the footage and analyzed the data and debated the meaning. Some of them thought it was a trick. Some of them thought it was an accident. Some of them thought it was impossible. But those who truly watched saw the truth. Humans were not special because they were strong. They were special because they loved. They loved fiercely and completely and without reason. They loved creatures that could kill them. They loved strangers who needed help. They loved the universe in all its danger and darkness, and they made it brighter just by being in it. That was the gift of humanity. The ability to look at a monster and see a friend. The ability to open a jacket in a storm and make room for those who were cold. On 7, the base became something more than a military outpost. It became a meeting place, a bridge between species. Humans and worked together, lived together, became something neither could have been alone. Was promoted, she was given awards and titles and recognition from the highest levels of the Union. But she did not care about any of that. What she cared about was the small creature who pressed against her leg every morning, the amber eyes that looked at her with trust, the thunder-rumbling purr that told her she was home. She had become more than a soldier, more than a rescuer, more than a legend. She had become a mother. And in a galaxy full of dangers and darkness and fear, that was the most human thing of all. On quiet nights when the green clouds parted and the stars came out, would sit on the observation deck with her cubs beside her. And her family, her pack, her heart. They would look up at the universe together, all those lights, all those worlds, all those beings who had seen their story and learned something new about what it meant to be human. "Do you think they understand?" asked one night, standing beside them. Smiled, she thought about the cave and the rain and the choice she had made. She thought about all the people who had said it was impossible and all the cubs who had proved them wrong. "They are starting too," she said, "and that is enough." Because in the end, that was all anyone could do, start somewhere. Open a door, make room for someone who needed warmth. The universe was vast and dark and full of danger. But humans had fire, and they were willing to share. That was the story that spread across the stars. The story of a woman and four cubs and a simple act of kindness that changed everything. And it all began with rains. Acid rain falling on four small creatures who were dying. And a human who opened her jacket and said, "Come in. Come in out of the cold. Come in and be safe. Come in and be family."